The Midnight Caller. Sarah lived a quiet life in her cozy suburban home. The evenings were serene, filled with the soft hum of the TV and the comfort of her routine. One night, at the stroke of midnight, her phone rang, shattering the calm. She answered, only to hear a distorted voice whispering cryptic messages and threats. Unsettled, Sarah tried to dismiss it as a prank. However, the calls continued each night, growing more menacing. The voice on the other end became increasingly chilling, making her feel as though she was being watched, turning her once safe haven into a prison of fear. Terrified by the relentless calls, Sarah reported the harassment to the police. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving tough cases, was assigned to her case. He assured Sarah that they would find the caller and put an end to her nightmare. Sarah changed her phone number and installed state-of-the-art security systems, hoping to regain some sense of safety. But the calls continued, each one more threatening than the last. The distorted voice now hinted at knowing intimate details about her life, from the clothes she wore to the meals she ate. Detective Miller began his investigation but soon discovered that the calls were untraceable, offering little comfort to Sarah. The police presence did nothing to deter the caller, and Sarah's fear and paranoia escalated. She felt watched and vulnerable, her once safe home now a fortress under siege by an unseen enemy. Detective Miller's investigation finally yielded a breakthrough. He uncovered disturbing evidence linking the calls to the house's previous owner, a deranged stalker with a history of obsession. This revelation sent chills down Sarah's spine. Digging deeper, they discovered a hidden room within Sarah's house, concealed behind a false wall. The room was filled with surveillance equipment and personal items belonging to Sarah, including photographs and notes detailing her daily routines. Just as the horrifying reality began to sink in, Sarah received another call. This time, the caller's voice was calm and menacing, revealing that he had been watching her from inside the house all along. Terrified, Sarah was lured into the hidden room, the voice on the phone guiding her steps. She came face to face with the deranged stalker, who had never left. The walls closed in around her as the nightmare she had been living became a horrifying reality. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to escape, but the stalker quickly overpowered her, trapping her in the hidden room. She pounded on the walls and screamed for help, but it was no use. Detective Miller rushed to the scene, but he arrived too late. Sarah's horrified scream echoed as the door locked behind her, sealing her fate. In the eerie silence that followed, the room's walls were adorned with pictures of other women, hinting at the stalker's deranged mind and suggesting Sarah might not be his last victim. The nightmare was far from over. The haunting of Hollow Manor. Hollow Manor loomed ominously against the darkening sky, its crumbling facade and overgrown grounds a testament to years of neglect. Known throughout the region for its haunting history, the manor was said to be the eternal prison of its former owner, Old Man Hargrove. James and Lisa, two skeptical investigators, approached the manor with determination. They were here to debunk the supernatural myths and uncover the truth behind the eerie tales. Confidently, they set up their recording equipment in the dusty foyer, their voices echoing in the empty halls. As night fell, they prepared for what they believed would be an uneventful stay, eager to prove that the manor's reputation was nothing more than local legend. As the night deepened, the temperature inside Hollow Manor began to drop, creating chilling cold spots that made James and Lisa shiver. Strange noises echoed through the halls, soft footsteps, distant whispers, and the creaking of unseen doors. Fleeting shadows danced at the edges of their vision, vanishing when they tried to focus on them. Lisa's unease grew as she started seeing unsettling visions. The spectral form of Old Man Hargrove appeared in mirrors and windows, his hollow eyes watching her intently. Ghostly figures flitted through the rooms, their faces twisted in silent screams. The disturbances escalated rapidly. Objects moved on their own. Chairs slid across the floor, books flew off shelves, and doors slammed shut with deafening force. Disembodied whispers grew louder, filling the air with a cacophony of malevolent voices. James and Lisa's confidence wavered, replaced by a growing fear that the legends of Hollow Manor were horrifyingly real. While searching a dusty, forgotten room, James and Lisa stumbled upon an old leather-bound diary. As they read its pages, the horrifying truth unraveled. Old Man Hargrove had been a necromancer, trapping the souls of his victims within the manor. Each entry detailed dark rituals and the tormented spirits he had bound to the house. Panic set in as they realized the extent of the danger. Desperate to escape, they rushed to the front door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. The air grew heavy, and the spirits of Hargrove's victims began to rise, their ghostly forms controlled by the malevolent presence of Hargrove's ghost. James and Lisa fought to break free, their hearts pounding with terror. They pushed and clawed at the vengeful spirits, but their efforts were in vain. The supernatural forces were too powerful, overwhelming them with an unrelenting grip. The malevolent energy of Hollow Manor ensnared them, their escape slipping further out of reach with each passing second. In their final moments, James and Lisa were dragged into the suffocating darkness by the vengeful spirits, their terrified screams echoing through the hollow halls of the manor. Their voices joined the haunting chorus of trapped souls, a symphony of eternal torment that filled the air. As the last candle flickered out, a chilling silence settled over Hollow Manor. The shadows seemed to pulse with new life, hinting at the addition of James and Lisa's spirits to the manor's eternal haunting. Forever bound to the cursed place, they became part of the dark legacy that awaited anyone daring enough to enter Hollow Manor. The sleepless watch. Ethan stepped into the sleek, modern research facility, the sterile environment giving off an air of clinical precision. The bright, fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floors, and the walls were lined with sophisticated monitoring equipment. The atmosphere was quiet, almost unnervingly so, adding to the sense of isolation. Dr. Reynolds, the overseeing scientist, greeted Ethan with a professional smile. Dr. Reynolds, a seasoned researcher with a calm demeanor, led him to a small, sterile room filled with monitors and wires. "We'll be monitoring your brain activity as you stay awake for 72 hours, Dr. Reynolds explained. This will help us understand the effects of prolonged wakefulness on cognitive function and brain patterns." Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity. The prospect of participating in groundbreaking research intrigued him, and he was confident in his ability to endure the sleepless nights ahead. As he settled into the room, surrounded by the hum of machines and the cold, clinical atmosphere, he felt ready to take on the challenge. Little did he know, his confidence would soon be tested in ways he could never have imagined. As the first night progressed, Ethan started to experience unsettling visual disturbances. In the corners of his vision, he saw a dark figure lurking, just out of clear sight. The figure was shadowy and indistinct, a formless presence that seemed to disappear whenever he tried to focus on it. Ethan shook his head, trying to clear his mind. "Just hallucinations," he muttered to himself. He had read about the effects of sleep deprivation and knew that such visions were common. Determined to stay focused, he returned his attention to the monitors and data collection, dismissing the sightings as tricks of his fatigued mind. But as the hours dragged on, the dark figure became more persistent. It appeared more frequently, edging closer each time. The once vague silhouette started to take on a more defined shape, and Ethan could almost make out features, eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the room. His heart began to race, and a sense of unease settled over him. No longer able to ignore the figure, Ethan felt a growing paranoia. He glanced around nervously, feeling the figure's presence even when he couldn't see it. The room, once a sterile haven of scientific inquiry, now felt oppressive and sinister. Despite his best efforts to remain rational, the escalating appearances of the dark figure gnawed at his sanity. Each glance, each movement out of the corner of his eye, eroded his confidence and left him feeling increasingly vulnerable and alone in the cold, clinical environment. The second night brought a terrifying change. The shadowy figure no longer stayed at the edges of Ethan's vision. It began to move closer, whispering ominous messages that sent chills down his spine. "You can't stay awake forever," it hissed, its voice a cold, eerie whisper. "When you sleep, I will take your place." Ethan's fear deepened. He tried to ignore the figure, but its presence grew stronger, its whispers more insistent. He desperately searched through the research facility's database, hoping to find some rational explanation for his experiences. Instead, he stumbled upon old, obscure documents about sleep demons, malevolent entities that prey on insomniacs, drawing strength from their victims' sleep-deprived minds. His blood ran cold as he realized the figure wasn't just a hallucination. It was a demon, intent on taking over his body. Panic surged through him, and he rushed to find Dr. Reynolds. "Doctor, I need to talk to you. There's something in here with me. It's real, and it wants to take over my body," Ethan pleaded, his voice trembling with fear. Dr. Reynolds looked at him with a mixture of concern and skepticism. "Ethan, you've been awake for nearly 48 hours. Severe sleep deprivation can cause vivid hallucinations. What you're experiencing isn't real," she said, trying to calm him. But Ethan couldn't be pacified. "No, you don't understand. This isn't just sleep deprivation. It's something else, something evil," he insisted, his paranoia and desperation growing. Dr. Reynolds' dismissal only intensified Ethan's fears. Alone and increasingly frantic, he struggled to stay awake, knowing that if he succumbed to sleep, the demon would take his place. His sanity teetered on the brink as he battled both the supernatural threat and the disbelief of those around him. The sterile walls of the research facility seemed to close in, and the line between reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. In the final hours of the study, the shadow demon became fully visible, a dark, menacing figure looming over Ethan. Its eyes glowed with malevolent intent as it reached out, its grip cold and overpowering. Ethan fought with all his strength, but exhaustion and fear weakened him. "Stay away!" he screamed, thrashing desperately. But the demon's hold tightened, and with a forceful yank, Ethan was dragged into a nightmarish realm. His consciousness slipped away, lost in a swirling vortex of darkness and terror. Back in the research facility, Ethan's body lay still for a moment, then slowly stirred. The eyes that opened were no longer his, cold, calculating, and devoid of humanity. The shadow demon had taken over, its plan fulfilled. As the now possessed Ethan sat up, Dr. Reynolds entered the room, clipboard in hand. "How are you feeling, Ethan?" she asked, unaware of the sinister transformation. "Never better," the demon replied, a chilling smile playing on its lips. The final scene showed Dr. Reynolds preparing for the next participant, oblivious to the true nature of the entity now inhabiting Ethan's body, hinting at the continued cycle of horror yet to come. The long drive. Mark and Rachel drove through a desolate stretch of highway, the vast emptiness around them stretching into the night. The road was eerily silent, with only the occasional rustle of wind through the barren landscape. Mark, focused on the road ahead, and Rachel, excited about their vacation, chatted light-heartedly to pass the time. Suddenly, they saw a lone figure standing by the roadside, a hitchhiker. Feeling a mix of curiosity and sympathy, they decided to give him a lift. At first, the hitchhiker seemed normal, making polite conversation. However, it wasn't long before his behavior turned unsettling, speaking in cryptic riddles and making eerie comments about their destination. A chill crept into the car, and their excitement began to wane. As they continued down the dark highway, the hitchhiker's conversation grew increasingly bizarre. He began speaking in riddles, his voice low and cryptic. "What lies at the end of the road is not always what you seek," he murmured, casting a sideways glance at Rachel. Mark and Rachel exchanged uneasy glances, their initial curiosity turning to discomfort. The tension escalated when the hitchhiker started revealing intimate details about their lives, details he couldn't possibly know. He spoke of Rachel's childhood home, described Mark's workplace, and mentioned a recent argument they had. The car's atmosphere grew heavy with fear. "What awaits you is far darker than the night," the hitchhiker said ominously, his eyes reflecting a hidden menace. Mark gripped the steering wheel tighter, and Rachel's heart raced. The once quiet drive had become a nerve-wracking ordeal, with each cryptic comment from the hitchhiker deepening their sense of dread. The shadows outside seemed to close in, mirroring the darkness now enveloping their thoughts. Unable to bear the mounting tension any longer, Mark pulled the car to a stop on the side of the road. "This is your stop," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Rachel nodded in agreement, her eyes wide with fear. The hitchhiker, however, simply smiled and stepped out. As soon as he closed the door, he vanished into thin air, leaving them both in stunned silence. Mark and Rachel sped away, hoping to leave the eerie encounter behind. But to their horror, just a few miles down the road, they saw the hitchhiker again, standing by the roadside with the same unsettling smile. Mark's hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel tighter, driving faster, but no matter how far they went, the hitchhiker always reappeared ahead of them. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in an endless loop. The same stretch of highway repeated endlessly, with the hitchhiker always waiting for them. Desperation and fear filled the car, the once familiar road now a nightmarish prison from which there was no escape. Their journey had turned into a relentless, inescapable horror. Mark and Rachel's attempts to escape grew frantic. They sped down the highway, took sharp turns, and even tried driving off-road, but the hitchhiker's presence remained unshakable. Each reappearance brought him closer, his eerie smile more menacing. Desperation turned to horror as they finally realized they could never escape. The hitchhiker's ghostly grasp held them in an unending loop, doomed to relive this nightmarish journey forever. As their car vanished into the darkness, another vehicle approached the same desolate stretch of highway. Inside, two new travelers chatted happily, unaware of the fate that awaited them. The haunted road claimed another set of souls, the cycle of terror continuing without end. The abandoned hospital. Tom and Megan stood before the abandoned hospital, its crumbling facade and broken windows looming ominously in the twilight. Ivy crept up the walls, and the once bright St. Mary's sign was now barely legible. The air was thick with a scent of mildew and decay, adding to the eerie atmosphere that surrounded the old building. Tom and Megan, seasoned urban explorers with a popular blog, exchanged excited glances. Armed with cameras and flashlights, they were eager to uncover the hospital's hidden history and share it with their followers. The thrill of exploring the unknown and the potential for discovering something truly extraordinary fueled their enthusiasm. With a creak, they pried open a side door and slipped inside, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The interior was a haunting sight. Peeling paint, rusted gurneys, and scattered medical equipment told tales of a place long forgotten. Shadows danced in the flickering light of their flashlights as they ventured deeper, ready to document whatever secrets the abandoned hospital held. Tom and Megan carefully navigated the dilapidated corridors, their flashlights casting long shadows that danced across the walls. In an old, cluttered office, they stumbled upon a dusty filing cabinet. Inside, they found a trove of medical records, yellowed with age. As they read through the documents, a disturbing picture emerged. The records detailed unethical experiments conducted by a nurse named Evelyn. The notes were filled with horrific details of patients subjected to cruel and unusual treatments, many of whom had vanished without a trace. A chill ran down their spines as they absorbed the grim history. Suddenly, the faint sound of medical equipment whirring to life echoed down the hall, followed by distant, blood-curdling screams. Tom and Megan exchanged uneasy glances, the excitement of their discovery quickly turning to fear. They tried to rationalize the noises as the old building settling, but the sounds grew louder and more insistent. As they ventured further, the hospital seemed to come alive around them. Ghostly figures of patients and staff began to appear intermittently, flickering in and out of existence. One moment they were alone. The next, they saw a spectral nurse pushing an empty wheelchair or a translucent patient wandering the halls. The air grew heavy with an oppressive presence, and the temperature dropped, making them shiver. Each step they took was filled with mounting dread. The once fascinating exploration had become a nightmarish ordeal. They could feel eyes watching them from the shadows, and the sense of unease was palpable. The haunting realization set in. They were not alone in the abandoned hospital. Determined to uncover the full story, Tom and Megan ventured deeper into the bowels of the hospital. They navigated through winding corridors and descended into the basement, where the air grew colder and the walls narrower. The sense of dread intensified with every step. The old boiler room, long unused, held more medical records and personal journals that revealed even darker aspects of Nurse Evelyn's sinister past. As they pieced together the history, they learned that Nurse Evelyn had been a fanatic, obsessed with experimenting on patients to unlock the secrets of life and death. Her twisted mind saw patients not as people but as subjects for her cruel tests. The hospital had shut down amid rumors of her malevolent deeds, but she had vanished before justice could be served. Their investigation was abruptly interrupted by a ghostly figure emerging from the shadows. Nurse Evelyn's ghost, with her cold, malevolent eyes and a sinister smile, appeared before them. Her spectral form flickered in the dim light, her presence chilling them to the bone. She moved with purpose, holding spectral medical tools. Her intent, clear. Panic set in as the ghost of Nurse Evelyn advanced. Tom and Megan tried to run, but the hospital seemed to conspire against them. Doors slammed shut on their own, corridors stretched endlessly, and their path became a labyrinth. The sounds of medical equipment and distant screams intensified, surrounding them in a cacophony of terror. Desperate to escape, they retraced their steps, only to find themselves back in the same haunted halls. Nurse Evelyn's ghost followed them relentlessly, her voice echoing through the corridors. "You cannot leave. You are mine now," she whispered, her words sending shivers down their spines. Their flashlights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Tom and Megan clung to each other, their breaths ragged with fear. Every attempt to escape was thwarted by supernatural forces. The walls seemed to close in, and the ghostly figures of past patients watched them with hollow eyes. Realizing the hopelessness of their situation, they frantically searched for any exit, but the hospital had transformed into a prison. Nurse Evelyn's ghost was everywhere, her malevolent presence growing stronger. They stumbled into an old operating room, where spectral restraints clamped onto their wrists and ankles, immobilizing them on the cold metal tables. Tom and Megan struggled against their bindings, but it was futile. The ghostly form of Nurse Evelyn loomed over them, ready to continue her horrific experiments. Their screams echoed through the abandoned hospital, joining the eternal night of suffering that Nurse Evelyn had created. Tom and Megan found themselves strapped to the cold metal operating tables by Nurse Evelyn's ghost. The spectral restraints were unyielding, and Nurse Evelyn's malevolent smile never wavered. She began her experiments, the ghostly instruments cutting and probing with agonizing precision. Their screams filled the air, echoing through the empty halls of the hospital. Though her experiments were brief, the pain was excruciating, unlike anything they had ever felt. Their cries of agony blended with the distant screams of past victims, creating a chilling symphony of suffering. The ghost of Nurse Evelyn, satisfied with her work, faded into the shadows, leaving Tom and Megan writhing in pain. As their consciousness faded, the door to their escape sealed shut, locking them into the hospital's eternal torment. The final scene showed the hospital standing silently in the moonlight, its haunted walls hiding the horrors within. The eerie quiet hinted at the endless torment awaiting anyone who dared to intrude upon the cursed grounds, where Nurse Evelyn's twisted experiments would continue indefinitely.